was in the U.S. Infantry, the 87th Division, Company C, 347th Regiment. I was inducted into service on March 10th, 1944, and went in service in Del Mar, New York. Was then transferred down to Fort Dix for indoctrination.
Did you enlist or?
No, I was drafted. As a matter of fact, when I was drafted, a young fellow I knew, we were in line, they said we could go to the Army, Navy, Marines. And he says, Tony, let's go in the Navy. And I said, Tommy, I hate water. I'm going to the Army. The ironic part about it, he never went overseas. So, but anyway, I went in the Army. I was always thought I would be in the Army, and I always had the Army in my mind, even in high school.
Well, did you think you made the right decision?
I think so, yes. Yes, I do think so, yes. I mean, I'm here, so it must have been the right decision.
Why don't you start giving me your story? I mean, there's so many of them, I'm sure. But what would you want to start with to tell us about when you got into the service?
Well, I think the first thing is I went down to Fort Dix, and it was just a matter of getting your shots and getting used to it. Of course, I was from a village of 800 people, so anything going any more than 50 miles to me was an adventure. In fact, I used to think Little Falls was thousands and thousands of miles away. And after Fort Dix, they put us on trains and wound up in Camp Roberts, California, which is out in between San Francisco and L.A. And Camp Roberts is divided into two camps. There was a big camp, and then there was the camp on the other side of the river, and we were smaller. They had both field artillery and infantry there. And I was assigned to an infantry training battalion. As a matter of fact, Red Skelton, the movie star, was training as a field artillery. I never got to see him. He put on a couple of shows, but I never got the chance to go over and see him at that time. And so we had 17 weeks of basic training. That consisted of the basic training. Actually, the hardest part was 2 weeks of bayonet practice. But it was funny, as we would throw maybe one hand grenade, fire one mortar, fired a machine gun once, and of course they thought we were equipped for that. Keeping in mind, of course, that they had to do everything in 17 weeks. And so they didn't know what we were going to do when we got in service. We didn't know whether it would be a rifleman, a BAR, machine gunner, where we'd fire mortars, or what we'd do. We might even be just an ordinary runner or something like for information. We might be attached to the Signal Corps. But they trained basically all of us for infantry work. And we were equipped in an M1 rifle, and that's the way it worked. I enjoyed basic quite a bit, though, because we had, luckily we had a good sergeant, good captain, and we had an excellent mess sergeant. Matter of fact, it's a privilege to go on mess duty with him because it was enjoyable. He was a real good cook.
How old were you?
I was 18. I turned 18 on January the 19th. March 10th, I was in service. So it didn't take long.
So you kind of were in was a kind of a culture shock just to go in there because you're from such a small town.
Yes, it was, because as I say, I mean, the moving any kind of distance kind of was a shocker to me, you know.
Well, tell me about when you first went overseas and what happened to you.
Well, as I say, then I was, after basic training, I was transferred to the 87th Infantry Division in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And there I was assigned as an ammunition carrier in a 30-millimeter squad. There was a sergeant, a gunner, assistant gunner, and 3 ammunition carriers. And I met a good friend by the name of Gene Garrison, who happened to wind up being my foxhole buddy. So I'll talk about him later. But so we were there about 2 months, and we were told then to go overseas. And we sent down to New York, and believe it or not, I went over on the Queen Elizabeth. There were 15,000 men on board this Queen Elizabeth. There were 2 of our regiments and 1 regiment from another division. There were a crew of 3,000 men. It was about a mile around the deck, and we got assigned one room above the engine room, so we got quite a bit of noise. We were unescorted. We went over in 5 days. They told us if you went overboard, they weren't going to stop the ship. That was it. Too bad. And I didn't swim too well anyway, so I didn't go overboard. But as I say, I didn't take to going overseas too well, though, because I lost 5 pounds in 5 days. But what's happened, that with about 6 deep in the hammocks, it was a matter of everybody getting sick. Probably 3/4 of the ship was sick. So therefore, you couldn't step anyplace without, if you know what I mean, somebody getting sick. And then after 5 days, though, we were quite lucky being unescorted. We wound up in Scotland, right below Glasgow, a town called Gurrock. And the only time I ever saw a general is they say don't volunteer, but I happened to volunteer for baggage duty because I knew I'd get off the ship right away. Sure enough, I did. And the general came off at the same time. He was one of the first ones to come off. So that was the one and only time I ever saw a general, believe it or not. And we stayed in Scotland just 1 day. Then they put us on trains and sent us down to Manchester, England. And one thing I point out, the English trains are not like our trains. They have a bumper between them, the shocker. And you don't feel any bump. It goes right along. It's surprising how smooth they are. I think we could learn something from the English about the way they couple the cars. And we were billeted in a little village called Hale, outside of Manchester, New York, Manchester, England. We stayed there about, approximately a month and a half. And I can remember I met an English family there, and Thanksgiving time, they invited me over for lunch. And I can remember I picked up a half a dozen oranges. I brought them there, and you'd have thought that I brought them the world. They had not only hadn't had an orange, but they hadn't seen an orange for a period of 5 years. Can you imagine? Imagine somebody not seeing an orange for 5 years, and they were so grateful. And they were willing to share everything with us. I mean, they treated us real well. And then from England, we were sent down to the coast. And from there, we boarded an Indian ship, took us across the channel, and we landed in Omaha Beach in France. And one of the first things they did, they took our bags, and duffel bags, and they stored them in a warehouse. As a matter of fact, I made out my will. And my will, the only thing I had was a 2-wheel bicycle, which I willed to my brother. And he never got it because I came back from service. But after service, they did send us those duffel bags, so I still have the original duffel bag and everything that was in it there. And so that's where we wound up. We wound up in France. But another thing that surprised me, one of the small towns, it sounded like maybe like Herkimer-Fulton, called St. Vith. And to my shocking amazement, there was one wall of one house that was standing there. Can you imagine? One wall of one house that was all that was left in the village. It was just like going to a dump and just seeing one wall of one house in this whole village. So it's kind of a shocker. I mean, that you could just, then it started to sink into you, hey, you know, this is not you're not going to a ball game, you're going to something else. And from there we were moved on towards Metz, and that's where we met our first action there. We fired our first artillery shells out there. And in Metz, there were 10,000 troops, German troops surrounded. But we bypassed them and we let the rear echelon troops take them. Then we were herded on towards the German border. And it was, I can remember this very distinctly because we had a foxhole buddy, and you dug your foxholes together. And he was an ammo camera as well as I was. And I remember it was on the 15th of December, we were talking about it, and his birthday was the 16th of December. And he said one of the things we wanted to do was live to be 19. Of course, don't I get hit the next day on his birthday? Of course, we'll always remember that. But I must go back to going overseas. Our division, I said, averaged about 21 years old. Our sergeant was an older man. He must have been about 22 or 23. And on the way over, his name was Bob Kelly, and he told me, Tony, says, I'm not going home. He knew this. And he did. And he didn't come over. But I have to object, I'm sorry. But anyway, so on the 15th, we were digging a foxhole, and it just so happened when we dug our foxhole, there was about 3 inches of water in that foxhole. And there were shells coming in, and of course we could hear a shell coming in, and my foxhole buddy had put his trench shovel right alongside the foxhole. And the shell came in, and we dove into the foxhole, and this shell hit his shovel right in half, split his shovel in half, and I got a nosebleed from it. And Gene said, my buddy said, boy, that was close. The guy in the next foxhole says, close hell, that hit me in the helmet. He caught him right in the steel helmet, it bounced off there. A week later, that guy was dead. So the next morning, we pushed off in an attack. And it just so happens that my buddy Gene, he lucked out because sleeping in the foxhole, he got a rash right down his leg, and he couldn't move too well. So he had to fall in with the heavy weapons company, which was in reserve. But we'd gotten information from our advanced scouts saying that we had to take a hill. And on the hill there was a little sniper fire, nothing big. The town on the left was going to be taken by one regiment. The hill on the woods on the right was going to be taken by another regiment. That didn't work out. So here they were firing from this end. We were advancing, and we're going along this big field, and the Germans had it zeroed in. They knew exactly where every person was. And our own field artillery were firing short, and they were firing behind us. And all of a sudden, I'm walking along, and I felt this pain in my leg. I spun around, completely around, landed on my fanny. And I was laying there, and I knew that I got hit. I didn't bleed much. But you're supposed to drink a full canteen of water at the time with the pills you take. And a friend of mine, one of my buddies, who happened to be a Jewish boy, went by and says, "Tony," he said, "you have a full canteen of water." And I said, "No, I don't." Without hesitation, he threw me his full canteen. He could put chocolate in there, make it like a chocolate drink, and I threw mine back to him. And I bandaged my leg. And unbeknown to me, later on they told me what was happening. Machine gun bullets were hitting on both sides of me. And I don't know why I didn't get killed, but so I got out of there, and I found myself in a culvert, a big-sized culvert about 8 or 10 foot over road there. And I remained there, I think probably about 2 or 3 hours. And in the course of the battle, about 4 or 5 of us wound up there. As a matter of fact, while we were there, I saw one of my buddies get hit with a shell. And I only saw a little piece of him. That was all that was left of him. He went right up in the air, just like just one piece of a body. And so after being in this culvert for 3 or 4 hours, we walked back about 3 or 4 miles. Now mind you, I was hitting the leg, my feet were frozen. I didn't know at that time they were frozen. And a Jeep come along and asked us could we walk further. And we said no, we couldn't. So he put as many on the Jeep, about the 5 or 6 on the Jeep as he could. And they brought us back to an aid station. And I don't know why, but I don't remember another thing until probably the next day. They took me out of that aid station, and I was being carried into a hospital by 2 prisoners of war, German prisoners of war. And they brought me in. I just conked out that whole day. The next morning I woke up. They took my temperature, it was 104. Because I didn't bleed much, so what was happening was I was getting an infection in there. And the doctor came along and asked me if I could have just a local, because they wanted to save the ether and that type of thing for the head patients. In fact, he said one guy just had a shot of whiskey. That's all he had. So sure, I said, yeah, I'll do that, Well, they put me on the table, and 6 guys held me down. I could feel the doctor going in there and hitting that bone. But it was a piece of shrapnel like that. Because the idea with the shrapnel, it didn't take big pieces. In fact, the big pieces here didn't hardly ever. You could see them coming. But it was generally the small pieces of shrapnel got it. And I must have got hit by a mortar, because the Germans' gun, when their pieces, they went forward. Our American gun shells went this type. And their mortars, when it hit on contact, it would go forward too. So I got hit from the back. So it must have been like that I got hit by a mortar. That's the only thing I can realize. And as I say, and then from there, they moved me back to, eventually I wound up in a hospital in Paris. And as a matter of fact, while I was in Paris, when I was going to the hospital there, in the ambulance, I drove by the Eiffel Tower. The driver said, "Hey, look out the back, you'll see the Eiffel Tower there." And in the hospital, and by the way, the aid and the doctors were great. They were doing 40 and 50 major operations a day, these guys in the field there. I just couldn't get over how they did it, And but we were in the hospital. Glenn Miller's band was supposed to play one night. And it just so happens that was the day that Glenn Miller got killed. They never did find his plane, and that's the first night that Tex Beneke took over that band. They wanted to bring me down to see it, but I was in a wheelchair, and I said, "Fellas, it's too much bother, don't take me down there." And I can remember looking out on New Year's Day, looking out at the top of the field and seeing a football game, and I distinctly remember the score was 2-0 because it was so icy, and I guess somebody got a safety, and that's how the name of the game was. Then and it was ironic too, I had an older brother who was with the 104th Division, and he was in Paris at the time, but he didn't know I was wounded. He didn't know it until he got back to his outfit. Of course, he wouldn't have been able to find me anyway. So then they sent us, after I got patched up, and the funny thing happened to me in the hospital. Every night they would come in and give you a back rub, the nurses would. And the nurse was giving me a back rub, and she said, "Man, we were playing cards," and she said, "Okay, who wants a back rub?" I said, "Well, I'll take mine first because we want to go back to playing cards." And so she put rubbing alcohol on my back, and she turned to set the bottle down, and some idiot decides, says, "Hey, I wonder if this will burn." And he takes his lighter, and he touches it to my back. Well, have you ever seen blue flame about like that? Well, I was supposed to be a non-walking patient, but I tell you, I threw myself on the floor because I knew I could cover the flames. And the nurse took a robe and covered the rest of them. But I've never seen a lady cuss out a guy like she did. She used some words I'd never heard of. And it was funny too. It's another funny situation was they put 12 of us in one room one time, and of course you'd get penicillin every 4 hours, and they'd give it to you in the buttocks. And one guy was a tank driver, and he got hit in the cheek of his buttocks here. And of course they'd have to tape him right across the cheek of his buttocks. And of course, and then he got diarrhea, and of course that meant she'd come in and pull that tape off there. You could just visualize his buttock as red, just as red. Of course, getting the shots there too. But so after that, then they sent us back. They decided I was well enough to go back to my division. So what they would do, they'd send you back to the 3rd Army Replacement Depot, and the guys coming from overseas would come over, and then they would send you from the 3rd Army to the very core thing, and then they would send you to division outfit. And the poor guys coming in as replacements, they didn't know where they were going to go. They didn't know what they were going to do. They didn't know there was going to be a rifleman, a BAR man, a machine gunner, a mortarman, or they didn't know for a thing. You know, they could be a truck, anything. They could be anything. You didn't really know. But I went back to my own division and my own company. And when I got back there, as I said, we started out with 187 men. And by January the 2nd or 3rd, we were down to 12 guys that I knew. So that's quite a turnover. And as I say, it was really a shock.
How was it affecting you at the time? What did you do to cope?
Well, I'll tell you, there was sometimes there would be humor. Sometimes you didn't think about it. I think you prayed a lot. A real lot. So, as a matter of fact, a friend of mine just asked me just recently in church. He said, "Tony, did you ever see any atheists in service?" I said, "No, I never did." And there's another thing, I never saw any gay people either, because they didn't announce it, you know. But no, there was. It surprised you. Prayed a lot, you know, and you just wondered whether you were going to get it or not. It's funny, I never thought I was going to get hit. I don't know why, you know. I just didn't think. But as I said, that I did get hit on Gene's birthday on the 16th of December. And but as I say, so I went back to the outfit. I was paired up with my foxhole buddy again. And so then, of course, every day was the skirmishes. And we were in the light 30. And what they would do, they'd have 2 light 30 machine guns, one here and one here. And of course, the machine guns, they would go after first, the heavy weapons company. You know, they would try to get you knocked off. And so you'd fire burst and you'd run. You'd fire burst and runs. But you'd try to, like that. And I was surprised to know that if you hit 2% of your bullets with a machine gun, you're doing real well. The idea was to disperse as many bullets as possible, keep them down there. And then generally so we'd have battles here and there and every day like that thing. And as I say, I think one of the biggest battles we got into, we were headed for the Rhine River. And so before we got there, what had happened, we'd captured this pillbox. And it was a big German pillbox. And there was about, it would hold up maybe 200 or 300 people in there, concrete pillbox. But I can remember it was real cold, and we could only stay on guard duty about an hour. So you put you on guard duty an hour, and meanwhile you had to sleep in that hour. It'd take about 15 minutes to get to your position in light 30, and they were trying to defend the pillbox. And I was telling about a situation where they had this flag, Nazi flag that flew over it, and I was able to get that. And so they were telling about this one, when I was saying the Germans fired in the step ladder, first mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4, and their shells went forward. So we had 2 guys in the foxhole, and the sergeant was telling them to keep their heads down. Well, the one guy didn't keep his head down just about the time a shell came along and took his head right off. The other guy went completely nuts. And so I think a day or 2 later, they told me I had frozen feet again. So they sent me back, and the guy signed my big German swastika for me. I was sent to a hospital in Luxembourg. They claimed it was a summer home of the Duchess of Luxembourg. I'm not sure, but I was there a week, and it was just like a rest period, really. Never saw a doctor for a week. And after a week, the doctor came in and says, "How do you feel?" And I said, "The same, you know." And he said, "Well, you're ready to go back to your outfit." And I asked how I could do that, you know, since he said, "Well, keep your feet higher than your head." I said, "I'm in the infantry, doc. What do you want? How do I do it?" "This is easy. You'll find a way. Go on back." Well, really, basically it was, he couldn't do anything for me anyway, and I went back to the outfit. And I got back just in time to cross the Rhine River. And we crossed in a town called Rennes. It's where the Rhine meets the Moselle River. And the river is a wide, very wide river and a very fast-flowing river. And of course, we were going to cross it in pontoon boats, a surprise attack. Everything is a surprise, you know, early in the morning. So sure enough, we had practiced on the Moselle River before that, practicing. And the funny thing there, we were practicing there, and of course the guys decided to get into, I'll tell you a little story about, the guys decided to get into bottles of wine, Rhine wine. And of course we had full fuel packs on, gas masks, because we weren't sure to get a gas attack like they're doing right now. And finally, there was a guy that I know from, he was showing me a trigger. I had an outside trigger, and he was showing me how it worked. And he pulled the trigger accidentally, and the shot went right by my ear and rang. Well, about that time, a lieutenant came along and said, "Okay, guys, that's it. Put the wine bottles in a pile." This is the whole company. Well, there was a pile, it had to be 3 or 4 foot high of wine bottles. And about 5 or 10 minutes later, he says, "Okay, guys, now put the rest of the bottles there." And there was another pile just as big. So we practiced on the Moselle River. He said, "You realize that if you'd gone overboard with all the equipment, you'd all drown, you bunch of dummies, you know." but hey, you had to have some fun. So anyway, we crossed, before we were going to cross the Rhine River, we never had a lieutenant in our squad. Somehow or another, we always lost our lieutenants. And the night before, they came along and introduced us to a new lieutenant. Don't remember his name. We can never remember his name. That was the last we saw him. We don't know whether he got killed. The history book doesn't reference him. Don't know if we lost him, what it was. But anyway, it was early in the morning, and we decided we were going to cross the Rhine River. And of course, as I say, we got in the boats, and we got about 200 or 300 yards off the air, and all of a sudden, it was just like a football field lit up with flares. And here we were, sitting ducks out there. Every boat except ours, it's Company A, Company B, and Company C made the initial attack going overseas. Every boat except ours got hit. The boat next to us, everybody got hit, and a sergeant, wounded sergeant, pulled that boat down the river. I don't know how he did it, about 4 or 5 miles. He got the Silver Star for that. He should have got the Congressional Medal as far as I was concerned. But we landed on the other side of the river eventually, and of course it was pitch dark, couldn't see what we were doing. And we eventually fought our way up on top of the hill, and just a matter. And I don't remember too much about it, but I know that it was a case of sometimes just shooting. In fact, the guy next to me was firing so fast he wore out an M1 rifle. He wore it out. He burned it out. So we did manage to. Our objective was to take a hill, and we took the hill, and somehow or another, our squad, our machine gun squad, we were down to 4 guys at that time. We were separated from the rest of them. So we were on top of the hill, and we were in foxholes there, and because snipers were shooting at us, and there was one guy there that we didn't know, the 5th guy, and I don't know where he came from. We still don't know who he was, never did find out who he was. But he froze. He actually just literally froze, and we kept yelling at him to get out. And the sniper was shooting at him, and it's a wonder he didn't get killed. So finally, Tony Hubbard and I went out and grabbed him. We literally had to take him and pull him bodily out of it, just like carrying a load of wood out of there. He just wouldn't move. We never saw him again. I don't think he got killed, but we don't know who the guy was or anything else. Whether he was with another company, whether he was with another replacement, we didn't know. But later on, and it was funny too, that the Germans must have been there because in their foxholes, they had the dark bread and the Limburger cheese. You talk about stink, because they left there in a hurry. Well, later that day, we came across this castle. It's called Lahneck, L-A-H-N-E-C-K castle. It's a small castle. And we decided that, in fact, there was a story written by my buddy. It's in the Evening Telegram. They have a copy there that you could use to put it in the records about how we captured this castle. And it's funny because when we got there, they said, "Well, how are we going to get in?" I said, "Well, why just knock on the door and ask him to in?" So sure enough, we did. But there was a German lieutenant in there, but he was dying. He was badly, so we left him alone. And then we went back, and we finally joined their outfit. And again, later that day, what happened is that we got pinned down by a 20-millimeter gun. And we had a second lieutenant lead us across the Rhine River. And what had happened, he said, "Well, give me Sergeant Janicek and another guy, and I'll take the gun." I don't know if I told you this before or not. I don't know whether I'm repeating myself. But anyway, he didn't, and he got killed. And they sent our gun out to try and take it. Of course, luckily our sergeant was a little older. He must have been 26 or 27. And after we got pinned down, he said, "Okay, guys, let's get out of there." So we got out of there. And in fact, a couple of Germans were going to surrender, and before they came in to surrender, they were going to throw a hand grenade at us. And before they could, they shot him. So anyway, they were shooting a 20 millimeter overhead, and the air burst and were trying to come down on their heads like this here. And the guy next to me got a gash along his head right here. That's the only one that really got wounded. So we were going to leave there, and I decided, well, I was going to get a drink of water, and I reached back to get a drink of water in my canteen, and the canteen was empty. I said, some wise guy must have taken the top off and dumped the water out. Well, as I did, I could hear it rattle. Well, lo and behold, there were 3 pieces of shrapnel, about like that in there. It hit the cover stopped. I was really kind of mad because that would have caught me right here. Now that would have been what Forrest Gump said would be $1 million wound. Not only that, I would have spent another month in the hospital, and I could just visualize myself being bandaged by a lovely nurse. And not only that, but I would have got 5 additional points when I got discharged. You're always thinking that. So anyway, but as I say, we left there, and as we were walking along a ridge, and some P-51s were strafing the woods next to us there. Well, all of a sudden, the 4 of them strafed that, and by that time we'd gotten into the woods ourselves, and a 5th plane came. It looked like a P-47, the one that was the wide split body thing. And he came down and he started strafing us. Well, my foxhole buddy and I got behind a tree, and I think it's the scariest I've ever was, because here you have armor-piercing, 50 caliber bullets hitting the ground there, and they just hit it. They went into the ground like that there. They got 4 of our guys. 4 guys got killed. As a matter of fact, one of the guys got killed. I needed a new canteen, and I took his. I still have it today. You know, I mean, he wasn't going to use it, and it's hard. I don't think you call it cruel, but I had to have a canteen, and you wouldn't get around one. So I took that, and I say so. But that was the biggest battle we had. We did get the presidential citation for crossing the Rhine River, and it's ironic because what had happened later, just recently, our colonel told us that our captain, who I didn't have too much respect for anyway, he was an administrator more than a soldier, and he was so bad that our colonel sent him to Paris, and he wouldn't let us lead us across the Rhine River. And he had brand new second lieutenants. And of course, the second lieutenant was going to get promoted, but he got killed. And another thing that happened is one of the lieutenants in another company got drunk, and he refused to lead his men across the river. The colonel told me that guy wound up getting 20 years in Leavenworth. We had a colonel that was something. Our colonel went from a lieutenant to a full colonel in 13 months. Best officer we had. And so then we went on, and then after that, Patton, we were with General Patton's army. They put us on trucks and tanks. Well, you have put one company on tanks, and the rest of us on trucks. And we would go, in fact, before we did that, though, we were forced on a 72-hour forced march to go into Koblenz. Now, mind you, you're carrying 2 cans of ammunition, 22 pounds apiece. You're carrying 6 pounds. Any personal items you had, because what would happen in the morning, they'd give you 3 packs of rations, and you'd break it down. Sometimes you'd wind up with 3 cans of cheese or 3 cans of ham. You couldn't heat it, of course, and everything was cold. And you put everything in your pockets. So 72 hours, and we got a 10-minute break every so you could just imagine, we were just completely dead tired. But as I say, so then they put us on trucks, and when we would go along, we would meet the resistance, and the guys would get off the tanks, and the guys get off the trucks, and like that there. And one incident which we were supposed to, our machine gun squad was supposed to be the rear protection of the whole regiment. And of course, we were goofing around instead of paying attention to what was going on, and all of a sudden, and luckily I dug a foxhole about like that. Well, maybe like that, just like that. And all of a sudden, we heard a wing, wing right over our head, and they got within 10 or 15 feet of us, about 8 German soldiers. So I'm laying back like this in my foxhole, and I could see their bullets hitting my foxhole this way, and our gun could shoot but he couldn't see him. He was shooting, and he was hitting my foxhole. This I had to take him right in the sun. But we had one guy that was a replacement, and this is his first battle. And he was 21 years old, and I thought he was an old man, of course. He'd be only 18 or 19 at the time. And he could see. And he said that he was firing his M1, and he was firing into the dirt. He was so scared. I've talked to him since then. He says, you know, I never prayed before. He said, but I prayed that day. He said, I prayed that day. And funny, he said that he was so scared that he wet his pants. He said it's embarrassing, but he said I was that scared. He said it was his first firefight, you know. And but anyway, our other machine gun squad come in, and they captured the 8 Germans. And it's ironic. One of the guys got hit in the elbow, and he said, "Let me take the prisoners back," but they wouldn't because we know he would have killed them. He was that mad. So it works both ways. I mean, you know, you heard about atrocities on both sides. He did steal a ring from one of the guys. And I talked to him just recently, about a couple of years ago, and he said he felt a ring and a watch. He felt so guilty he finally sold it. He said it was always on my mind. Now, mind you, he sold his watch from a German soldier. It was on his mind all these years, 50-some years. So then we continued on, and we, as I say, we went on, and we were on these trucks. And the Germans, we were along a country road, and all of a sudden, 2 shells came in, and we knew the second and the third and fourth shell was going to come in real close to us. So at that time, we said, "Well, we'll get out of our trucks." And we laid in the ditch like that, and I was laying there with our gunner, and the third shell came in real close to us. And I said, "Jack, I don't like it here. Let's move." We moved about 10 feet away. Now, where I laid, where we moved, a buddy of mine went in there, and he got killed. We lost 20-some guys on 1 shell. Jack got hit in the elbow. It bandaged him up. Another guy got, this guy that I was telling you that was the rifleman with us, he got hit in the back. And he was 21. And I can remember him crying. He said, "Am I going to die?" I said, "No, you're not going to die, Jack. You're not going to die." He didn't. And I've talked to him since then, and he's out in Arizona. And but as I say, another guy, there was 6 under a truck, and he got hit. And I can remember it was a big guy, tremendously big guy, picking him up. And but it's ironic, too, because this fellow, when he dug a foxhole, he'd had the most cover on, and he would know when before the Germans fired a shell, they were going to fire it. He knew ahead of time. But the shell that got him, he didn't hear. He didn't hear it. 6 guys under a truck, and he's the only one that got killed. And he was on his hands and knees going down. He was ill-prepared. You know, I don't know why. So then we pushed on towards, we were going to try to get to Berlin, and we were pushed on towards the Czechoslovakian border. It's ironic, we had, and of course the Russians were coming, and the Germans didn't want to surrender to the Russians, no way. In fact, we had a German colonel came up one time and he wanted to surrender. We were all privates. He said, "Well, I'll only surrender to somebody of my equal rank." Well, we thought, hey, tell you what, the Russians got a lot of colonels. Go over there a mile or two, you can surrender to them. He said, "No, I'll surrender to you." But while we were there, about a week before the war's over, just one of our tanks went by, and there's a 14-year-old German boy laying in the ditch, and he shot a bazooka at it, and he hit that tank. And I saw them bring those guys out there burning alive, and I'll never forget that. It was terrible. So and it was shortly after that we were sitting in trucks, and the tank driver said, "The war is over, the war is over." We said, "Oh, great." Just about that time, a German Messerschmitt come over. Oh, no. We hoped he knows the war's over. Well, we could see the white of his teeth and smile, and he waved and went by, but so that was it. And so then we were assigned to a border guard for a week or two, and during that time, I did get an 18-hour pass into Paris. I didn't enjoy it much because I guess I've been drunk twice in my life, and the first time I was drunk, and I passed out in the park, slept 4 hours there, so that was my Paris deal. Even though I'd been in hospital in Paris, I never got out at all. And I did get to see a castle, a beautiful castle on the Rhine River. It's surprising. They had, you know those turrets they have? They call them, they're like a oatmeal turret thing. One of them they call a Hunger Tower, and the reason why is because in the old days when they had a siege, they would shoot bow and arrows over there, and they put the prisoners there. So during the siege, they couldn't feed the prisoners, so that's why they called it Hunger Tower. But surprisingly, they had a bridal chamber, and they had all kinds of ways to go into that castle. But the most impressive thing was when I went to Buchenwald prison, and there I did see, there it actually is as bad as it seems. I talked to one prisoner, and he said the best meal they got was when they made soup out of potato peels and water. And they slept on boards like there, no facilities if you go into the bathroom, cans like this here, cremated, and the commandant's wife, they're referred to as a bitch of Buchenwald, and what she would do is she'd take some of the prisoners and make sure they had a tattoo, take them on as lovers, then have them gassed before her husband got home from wherever he went, and then she'd make lampshades out of these tattoos. I actually have seen those, so it's true. And Buchenwald was true. Then after that, they sent us back to France, and back to Le Havre. We boarded the West Point. I got smart again. This time I volunteered for officers' mess, so I got to eat the same food they did, and I didn't get seasick. Went to Camp Kilmer, Fort Dix. We got our leaves. In fact, it so happens I met my older brother in France before I left. We got our leave together, and when we were home, they dropped a bomb because we were headed for Japan. They sent us to Fort Benning. They deactivated the outfit. They sent me to Fort Dix, and I stayed there until such time as you were assigned so many points, 5 points for Battle Stars, 5 points for the Purple Heart. That's why I said when I didn't get it the second time, I would have got 5 more points. But I was very fortunate because I was only in 1 year, 11 months, and about 20 days. So I was in and out fast. And I was one of the lucky ones. I got hit, and I came home.
Tell me about coming home.
Of course, we came home in the West Point, and which was our SS America at that time. And going by the Statue of Liberty, I had goose pimples. I got goose pimples. And it was, you can't describe it. The fireboats in New York, of course, I'd never been to New York anyway, and had never seen the Statue of Liberty. And, you just can't believe it, Really, 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 they treated us royally. And as I said, that it was, you can't, you don't appreciate America until you left it. Germany is similar to us, but this is Germany's a country structured like we are. But you just don't appreciate your home country until you come back to it. You begin to appreciate life. And you have a lot of thoughts. I mean, I think about my Sergeant Kelly, Bill Corolla, our gunner, and about my buddies. I was the only guy in the squad to come back because my foxhole buddy, before we come back, my foxhole buddy called Jonas. In fact, I wanted to go back to the hospital, and I asked the medic if he could send me back. But I was the only one in the squad to come back. Gene and I were the only two who were left, but he stayed over. And then, so since then, I've been able to get to see him, and we get to see each other at reunions. But it's quite a thing, you start out with 187 guys. As a matter of fact, my first sergeant is from Utica, New York, and I called him about 2 or 3 weeks ago. He got captured by the Germans. And but I found out that these guys would give up their life for me. And I would do the same for them. That you don't get. I don't know if my neighbor would give up his life for me. And I don't know whether I give up my life for neighbor. But here's a complete stranger who would give up his life for me. It was great to be home.
What about your family? When you left, who did you leave here? And did you have any contact with them during the
I had an older brother who was with the 104th. I met him in France. And other than that, I had a mother and father. I had 3 other brothers. No, I had 1, 2. Well, one brother, in fact, in 1945, I was in Fort Dix, and he was born in Christmas Day, 1945. And I had to come home and have to get the doctor, so I had that, so he was kind of an afterlife baby. And so we were a small family. We were a very close family. And after I got out of service, I was just 20 years old, and I met my wife, and was a teacher, and we got married, and we wound up in Herkimer. She's from up north. I have 4 children, all grown now. I have 2 girls and 2 boys. I have 4 grandchildren and 2 step-grandchildren. Really happy family.
How much have you told them of your war days?
My one daughter's more interested in most of them. my one daughter and my youngest son. My youngest daughter, my youngest son. My oldest son doesn't really talk too much about it. My oldest daughter, I didn't talk to her much about it. In fact, my second daughter is really involved in it. She would go out and work for the Vietnam vets and for the Korean vets, and when she was in Philadelphia, and she'd go out and sell items for them, and she's quite involved. In fact, I belong to the Military Order of the Purple Heart, where everybody has got something in common. You were wounded in action. And no, I do think, though, that people should talk about it. I really do.
Have you found that difficult to do early on?
I never did. But it's funny, some of the people who were prisoners of war do. In fact, this first sergeant of mine, he would never go to reunion. And I guess the reason they said he didn't go to reunion is because what happened, he was a lead non-com, and he could speak German. So therefore, he was an interpreter. As an interpreter, of course, naturally he got better food than the regular prisoners. And it's my understanding, and this is just strictly rumor, that some of the guys tried to escape, and the Germans captured them. So they went to my first sergeant and said, hey, look, the next time it happens, we're going to kill you. So he said to the guys, and now this is a rumor, the story I get, he went to the guys and said, hey, look, guys, don't try to escape. Of course, by rule of nature, you're supposed to try to escape. But I don't know what I'd have done if they'd have come to me and said, hey, if you guys try to escape. And of course, in most cases, they couldn't get away anyway. Very, very few people got away in it. I mean, let's face it, you know. But so it, I had, once in a while, I had some trouble talking about it. I mean, I talk about some things I try to shy away from, you know. It's just, as you see that, but generally, I do think it's important you talk about it. See, because what bothers me is that we visit the VA hospital in Syracuse, the Purple Heart does. Last October we went there, and there were 6 guys there playing with crayons. These are grown men. And yet, I was surprised to find out that the VA hospital, they'll only keep them there 2 months. After that, they kick them out. Now, if they don't have any place to go, that's tough. As a matter of fact, I've never used the facilities. And a year ago, I called. In fact, I tried to get in Rome Clinic. Now, mine, I was rated 2. That same day, I got a rating of 2 from the government. That means I'm second priority. I called up for an appointment, and they refused to see me. And another buddy of mine, Purple Heart, the same thing. So it's, you know, and after 2 months, they'll kick a veteran out. If he has no place to go, it's too bad. The only way they'll keep him, if his hospice is dying, they'll keep him. Now, I'm just trying to visualize what's going to happen to the guys that are there now, the guys and girls that are fighting now. I mean, I think what's happened, they've kind of forgotten. I don't think they should bend over backwards for the vets. But let's face it, we didn't have any choice. We went. We didn't question it. I never questioned the government. Never questioned it. My father said, you can't fight the government. We were brought up that way. You've got to respect the government. Right or wrong, I don't know how I feel about this situation right now. I hate war. I hate violence. But that's how I feel right now.
If you wanted your grandchildren to remember something, whatever you need, you think that there's a need to pass on, a need for them to remember, and you just started saying, I think sometimes they forget. What would you say to your grandchildren? What would you want them to remember from your experiences?
It's easier to love somebody than hate somebody. Somehow it's much better than a problem. You can settle every argument over a cup of coffee. We don't need this. What are you going to do with it? You got the whole world, what do you got? You got nothing.
Thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Can we bring up your stuff? So
Yeah,
you can
sure.
show it? Shots of it. Your story is so compelling. Some of these things are
No,
so amazing.
okay, here.
You want me to help you put those up there?
Just hold the,
Well, this is a,
hold that as steady as you can.
okay.
Who is this again?
This is, well, this is yours truly when I was first going in service, of course.
There he is, 18.
Yep.
Here, do you want me to hold it up there while he goes and looks at the other thing? Would you like me to do that? Look like that?
Yeah, this is, okay, this is a picture of me and,
Okay, I think he's still on this.
I'm sorry.
I wonder if you wanted the,
Let's see,
do you
can we
want
get
the,
a
do you want the
music
music stand? Is it over there? I don't know where it was. We're just gonna put this right here. Be a little rude and sort of put it in
That's
front
right,
of you
that's
here.
right, no bother.
But that way he can have the light to use. Tell me how that is for you, Ray, okay? What a great picture. What a great picture. So what year would that have been?
This is 1944.
1944, because you were there, you were in the service when the war actually ended.
Yeah, that's right. April 19, I think April, I forget what it was. In fact, I was talking to my wife the other day, and she says, I thought you said the war ended. I said, that was the war in Europe. The war in Japan ended after I was on
Kept
leave.
going,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Right.
It kept going. Yeah, they had, my brother saw the invasion plans of Japan, and I'm just telling you that it's a good thing we didn't invade because we would have leveled Japan, you know. And not only that, but they had 12, 13-year-old kids ready to defend that island. If you ever get a chance, get out and see Truman's Museum, and you want to see that.
Truman's Museum?
Oh, that's
Oh, that is
fantastic.
incredible.
Yeah.
Let's put-
Oh, this is the one at Herkimer was Camp. I think it was Camp Roberts,
Roberts,
Camp Roberts, California.
can you get in on that?
Yeah.
Can I move it for you a little? Kind of
You
skewed
gotta hold it
up a little
up
bit,
a little
huh?
bit, yeah. And tip it towards you. Yep, right there. Oh, right there.
Yeah. Camp Roberts. Okay, that's great.
This is our 87th.
Push the music stand straight up and down.
Great, can you do it?
This is the 87th Division, the Golden Acorn Division.
Golden Acorn.
Golden Acorn. It's funny, my best friend in Voorheesville there, his father belonged to that. And when he saw me, I thought he ran a bar room, and I thought he was going to jump right over the bar and kiss me. But it's funny, during the World War I, one regiment got sunk in the English Channel.
Get up there too.
Yeah, all right.
This is your map, right?
Yeah.